Hi, I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange. Today we're going to talk about politics and war. We'll get everyone's take on Governor Scott Walker's first 100 days in office. We will discuss all this talk about metropolitan cooperation between the city of Milwaukee and the suburbs. Exactly what does that mean? And we'll talk about the 150th anniversary of the start of the Civil War. All right, let me introduce the panel. As always, we have with us newspaper columnist Joel McNally, Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert, and Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, this week Scott Walker reached one of those media milestones, his first 100 days in office. It has certainly been a hypercharged and eventful 3 months. Is he surprising people? Is he disappointing people? Or, Denise, is he doing exactly what his supporters thought he would do?
Well, I think he's doing a little bit of the combination of both. I think certainly there's been some surprise about the way he's gone about fulfilling some of his campaign pledges, and that has been disappointing to some people. You take a look at his vote totals when he was elected governor. Over a third of his votes came from union members. So certainly, as you take a look at some of the legislation that has passed, or is in the process of being passed around collective bargaining issues. Certainly, I think that has been a surprise to those union members who voted for him. But I do think on the whole, he's done, at least in terms of the broad strokes, what he told people he was going to do. He wants to create jobs in Wisconsin, so he's taken some measures that he says will help to do that. And he's also really said he wants to get the budget under control, and he's made efforts to do that. Certainly not everybody agrees with the way in which he's done it, but he has done those things. I think, as always is the case, when you take a look at what someone promised to do when they were running, perhaps in their inauguration address, and you look back 100 days or a year later, the devil is always in the details. What someone may have promised to do and how they've been able to do it are oftentimes very much at odds with each other. And I think there's some of that in what he's been able to do in those first 100 days.
Gerard, he was introduced by Congressman Sensenbrenner yesterday in Washington as Governor Scott Walker. He's a very polarizing figure. But Sensenbrenner said that in a complimentary way. He's a polarizing figure, but is that hurting Walker in Wisconsin or not?
Not among the party faithful. He's been able to hold on to their support, those at least who are party activists, and certainly the elected officials that are members of the Republican Party continue to support him. You can witness that in the legislature. They've been able to hold the caucus together. There are a few of them that certainly would like to run away and distance themselves from some of the policies that he's tried to put in place in the last 100 days. But I think overall, these are pieces that certainly within the party, the governor has articulated he wanted to move forward with. The piece regarding the unions, that may have come as a surprise to a lot of folk, but at the end of it all, he still managed to hold their support. I think his problem is going to be, how do you expand on those numbers that the Republicans represent in this state? Are you going to be able to enlarge the party membership? And that's the big question that hangs out there, because he had been able to do some of that, as Denise had pointed out, with the union membership, and now that's starting to erode in large numbers. I don't know how you get that back. And I don't know what test you use other than an election where he is the actual candidate that's going to measure what kind of support he's been able to garner or lose as a result of some of his policies.
Joel, I know you're disappointed by a lot of things that Walker has done, but are you surprised at his first couple months?
Yeah, I have to say I'm absolutely surprised. I am. And I don't totally agree with either of my colleagues. I think he did promise to create jobs. He said that was going to be his #1 priority. That was what he ran on. And I haven't seen a damn thing he's done to create jobs since he's been governor. I've seen him do things to kill jobs. I've seen him, turn away $810 million that would have created jobs around this state. I've seen him attack people who have jobs, who are public employees, and say, we're going to slash your wages and your benefits, and if we're not going to do that, we're going to lay you all off. That's not creating jobs. And truthfully, I thought I knew the man. I really did. For the past 8 or 10 years, I've known him well. I've interviewed him repeatedly. And even though I did not agree with him politically, I thought he was an amiable, pleasant, pretty nice person and pretty decent person. And that's not the governor that we're seeing. We're seeing a hard-line, mean-spirited, attack kind of governor. That's not the way he was as county executive. He was always conservative, but he was amiable. He was easy to get along with. He was not trying to ram things down the throat of the county board. He was in fact, he put out his, conservative philosophies, and as long as he didn't have to take credit for taxes going up, he didn't care about the county government, I don't believe. I think that's why it's in such a horrible financial shape. He let the county board run county government. Now, what the significant thing that happened when he became governor was not that he was elected governor, because he had a good political personality, and he was an appealing candidate, and he said he was going to create jobs, and that was a popular position. But what happened was both houses of the legislature got taken over by Republicans that would do anything he wanted, and it turned out that what he wanted was ugly. And that is why it's polarizing. That's why this state is so divided. That's why, yes, Gerard is absolutely right. The Republican Party has moved so far to the right, they agree with his attacks on unions and public employees and everything, the slash and burn stuff he's doing, which wasn't what he'd done before. But he's also really alienated the other party and everybody else in the state. So you have people at each other's throats, and that wasn't the kind of leadership he presented here.
Is he becoming a national figure?
He has, I think, and this is one of the things.
And Michelle Bachmann.
I wouldn't even put him in.
He is exactly in that category. He's in the extreme right category.
First off, he's smarter than those two. Oh, he's smarter certainly than Sarah
Didn't sound
Palin.
very smart in that phone call.
But I would say that because the policies that he's brought forward, they are polarizing. You take a risk that you alienate an awful lot of folk when you start pulling back dramatically on those things that some assume that they're rights, some assume that they're pocketbook privileges, and this kind of thing is something that's being explored nationally, and he's thrown himself into the catapult of, off the catapult of policymakers like Mitch Daniels and the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. So, yeah, he's gotten some national attention. They're going to try to promote that a little bit more, is my guess, because it is policy that he could probably ride an exploratory committee for vice president on. The flip to that is back here in the state, if these policies manage to work, you're going to have a lot of people that will take a look and see if their pockets have been positively affected by it. Does it mean lower taxes? Does it mean more jobs, more people into the workforce paying taxes? If those things do come about as a result of this, and it may not happen in his first term as he would like, but if they do come about somewhere along the line that people begin to feel it was worth that risk, he'll get more votes.
I think that's the problem. I think the problem is you are not likely to see most of these turn around and cause dramatic improvements in the economy in 4 years. More importantly, for Scott Walker and for the Republicans, you're probably not going to see it in 2 years. So as we take a look at what's going to happen 2 years from now when the assembly is up, what's that going to do to the makeup of the assembly? Are people going to feel disenfranchised because they haven't seen a turnaround in the economy? Some people have seen their pocketbooks affected in terms of wages because of changes that have been made or cuts that have been made to local and state government. Is that going to, it's a tremendous gamble in some ways, because unless you're able to show a quick turnaround in the economy, which is what you've run on, you've given the Democrats the way to kind of pick at the point the fact that what you've done so far hasn't been successful, and to make 2 years from now a true referendum on whether or not this governor is.
And the only way that the turnaround can happen is for Barack Obama's recovery to be successful. Just the opposite of the policies that Scott Walker is pursuing. If he creates any jobs, it's because the economic recovery is given them to him, not by his actions, which are driving jobs away.
Later this month, Chris Abele takes over as Milwaukee County Executive, and there's been all this talk about getting the different municipalities to cooperate more with one another, primarily as a cost-saving measure. But you have to wonder if this will ever come to pass. Do the suburbs really want to share services with one another and with the city of Milwaukee? I think a lot of suburbs like to identify themselves as being different than Milwaukee. And even if you said this will be a money-saving thing, I would guess that a lot of suburbs would say, we don't want your garbage trucks, we don't want your parks workers.
You know what trumps that? Economics. Economics is what trumps that. That's why it is more likely to happen now, I think, than it ever has been, because with all of the state aid being pulled away, and people are desperate, local governments are desperate to make things work as cheaply as possible. And the politics of scale, the economics of scale works to that advantage. You're absolutely right. The reason why people moved to the suburbs was they wanted nothing to do with the city of Milwaukee. They wanted to make it clear that they had nothing to do with the city of Milwaukee and all those poor people and all those African Americans, and we're crossing a line, and then suddenly it isn't our problem. Well, it really is everybody's problem, because we all are in this together, and the ways to save money are to start consolidating now. And that might mean that you have to pay into some of the police costs and poverty costs in Milwaukee, but it also means that you don't have to have a separate fire department and a separate police department and a separate garbage department. And as a result, if you can save money, that's the only thing that trumps those emotional issues. And I think times are so desperate that it may happen this time.
Do you wonder if the move toward a more metropolitan form of government is because Milwaukee is running out of money to pay for their fire department, to pay for their police department, so they need to go to other sources for the money to combat those things in Milwaukee?
The irony is that I don't know if it'll be more metropolitan form of government as a metropolitan form of service delivery. And who oversees those delivery of services, I think that's going to be kind of jerry-rigged. Give you some examples. If you wanted to have the zoo controlled by some metropolitan form of, some cost-sharing form of governance, you would spin it out as opposed to having the city take it over or the city kick in some funds to run it. Likewise with transportation. Who wants to put the current bus service, which is mostly funded through the property tax, onto the property tax of other local municipalities, including the city of Milwaukee? So they'd have to come up with some structure to address that, and some other form like taxes other than the real estate tax to address it. The airport, spinning it out and then having some other kind of authority deal with that. And those are just county programs. Joel spoke to police and fire protection, let alone some of those things that support it, like the radio services. We can't even get them to come together on some of those things. Paramedics, we've had a tough time trying to get some cooperation around that from time to time. So I think it's going to be a difficult journey, not an impossible journey. At least you've got the two leading figures in Milwaukee County by way of the administration, the mayor and the county exec, talking along those lines. But frankly, they've got two very independent boards. And those boards have different notions. The Common Council and the county board, they have very different notions as to how they ought to proceed. And you've got different political agenda that would be involved in all of this as well. So it's not going to be an easy road. This is an opportune time to begin to talk about those things, and they're going to have those conversations. Who's in the room is going to make a difference. You can't ignore the state, because a lot of this is going to require some state involvement in making these things work. And it's also going to require that these local boards, including some of the smaller municipalities, and their mayors or administrators, that they get involved in these conversations and begin to push it as well.
Denise, I'd be surprised if the suburbs cooperated at all. I don't think New Berlin, Wauwatosa, whatever. I don't think they want to share fire departments, police departments, garbage pickup. I don't think they want to share any of that.
It's a hard sell. But I do think that this is an opportunity, as Joel mentioned, because of the economy. They may not want to do it, but this may be the way that they can do some consolidation, do some sharing that allows them to save some of the other things that are important to them. So as you're able to do some consolidation with a neighboring community on garbage delivery, does that allow you to keep your library open Monday through Sunday as opposed to closing your library on the weekend? You know, those are the kind of trade-offs that municipalities are now having to take a look at as they're taking a look at what their budget numbers look like. There's less money coming to municipalities from the state. That is a reality that is not likely to change, at least for the next 2 years. So what do communities need to be able to do to be able to continue to support all of the services that they want to provide to their citizens? So they have to take a look at some kind of consolidation, perhaps, but at the very least, collaboration. There are, in addition to the city of Milwaukee, talking to the county about some efforts in terms of ways there can be some kind of savings. Milwaukee Public Schools has also, through the approval of the county board, been working to take a look at some ways in which we might be able to have collaboration around procurement, perhaps around prescription drug coverage, other types of things where, once again, we can take a look at ways in which we can save some dollars that allow us to be able to do the things that we need to be able to do in a more cost-effective way. It's right now. It is certainly, there's concern, and there always has been, about the suburbs and remaining autonomous and not being linked back to Milwaukee County. But the reality of it is we're now talking about some very hard fiscal times where what people may wish to do and what they have to do become two very different things.
All right, can we take just a few minutes to talk about something that I'm fascinated with, the history of the Civil War. This week marks the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War, a 4-year-long battle over states' rights and slavery that left 600,000 people dead. Do you think any of the racial problems that we have in the country right now can be traced back to the Civil War still, or is that a long, long reach?
No, absolutely we can trace some of these things back. In fact, I'm a Civil War buff. My initials, GAR, are the same as the Grand Army of the Republic.
Yes.
When I was learning how to drive, I hit a headstone that had my initials on it, and I freaked out. But that being said, I've had relatives that served in the Civil War. I know that after the war had been fought, won by the North, the Reconstruction era began. We had a president in Andrew Johnson that was not very serious or not very accommodating in pushing the civil rights amendments, particularly those that would have granted voting rights and full participation into the American economy and social life, let alone the political life of the country. So had, I think, there been a different president, let's say an extended Lincoln term, we would have seen a different kind of engagement politically in this country, and as a result, a different kind of heritage socially going into the 20th century.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, and I should know the answer to this, but I don't, but I'm pretty sure that the Ken Burns program, the Civil War, I think was the most watched thing in the history of public television.
It was.
So a lot of people are into the subject, you know, that may not be into other aspects of history. Why do people still find the Civil War so incredibly fascinating?
I actually take a little different view of it. I think some of the issues that Gerard talked about, the racial issues in this country, and in the same way that they were in the backdrop of the Civil War, they're in the backdrop of life today. But I don't think that it's because of the Civil War. I think it's because race issues have been so intractable in this country, and some people are frozen in history, frozen in attitudes that we should have advanced beyond a long time ago. I don't, necessarily point back to Andrew Johnson's presidency after Lincoln's. I actually make the jump from Lincoln's presidency to Richard Nixon's presidency, and I'll tell you why. When Lyndon Johnson got those racist Southern Democrats to support civil rights, which the Democratic Party had fought, throughout its history, in some ugly, people getting up on the floor of the United States Senate and talking about other human beings as animals. That was the Democratic Party. And when Lyndon Johnson got the Democratic Party to support civil rights and pass the Civil Rights Act, that was a chance in this country for us to really move forward on that issue. And instead, Richard Nixon saw that as an opportunity for the Republican Party. He said, the Democrats have abandoned these Southern racists, and we should go after them. And that's when the party of Lincoln became against the Civil Rights Act and against the civil rights movement, and betrayed its own history, because they had fought for civil rights throughout their history, and then when the Democrats embraced it, they decided to go after white racists.
Denise, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because I really think the issue is we did not fully address what the Civil War was about. The Civil War was about slavery. That's it.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's about slavery. And almost immediately after the end of the Civil War, people began to throw in the issue of states' rights. Oh, it was really about states' rights. It wasn't about slavery. It was a cover. But it was also a way where, as a country, we did not have to address.
Didn't Lincoln even start out saying it was about states' rights, and then he grew to believe, no, it was simply about
But if
slavery.
you take a look at what Lincoln did, or Lincoln said in his first presidency, and particularly in his second inaugural address, he really did say that this, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Slavery was what divided this country. Slavery was what really stopped this country from moving west as quickly as it did because of concerns over the Missouri Compromise and whether or not that was actually the best way for this country to move forward to address the issue of slavery. When the Civil War was over, almost immediately, as Andrew Johnson came in as president, the issues that we needed to address around slavery in terms of making sure that people had the opportunity to have the full rights afforded to them in the Constitution, African Americans, that they had the opportunity to engage in those rights. By cutting that off, that set up in this country through Jim Crow laws that were established, through the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, kind of a second pseudo-slavery that really lasted until the 1960s. So you have this period of time where for almost 100 years after the Civil War ended, for many people in this country it had not. And we're still living with that legacy today.
But if both political parties had supported civil rights, we would be much further along today.
Well, it's not quite a civil war, but the budget battle in Washington is certainly getting pretty heated. And instead of the blues and grays, we've got the blues and reds. You might even say that the most important general in the Republican ranks these days is a certain congressman from Janesville, Wisconsin. He's the man with the numbers, and Rick Horowitz has a few words about some of them. Rick.
Nice guy. Nasty plan. Watch Paul Ryan flying back and forth to Washington, greeting constituents as he boards the plane. He's warm and friendly, everybody's favorite son. Chat with him about tax policy and tax politics, as I've had occasion to do, if only briefly, after a couple of those flights. And he's engaging, informed, refreshingly candid. But this latest proposal, a path to prosperity, he calls it, more like Ryan's road to ruin. That's not true for everybody, of course. For some people, it's let the good times roll. But for others, not so good at all. Look, he's gotten one thing absolutely correct. As a nation, we're way too deep in debt, and we have to do something about it. So his diagnosis is right, but his prescription? Far, far right. It's a time machine budget. It doesn't merely pretend that Barack Obama was never elected, that health care reform and financial reform were never enacted. Paul Ryan's budget plan turns back the clock much further than that. It tries to dismantle much of the social progress of the past century. It's every man for himself. That may be fine for the folks on top, for the social Darwinists, for fans of Ayn Rand, the conservative icon author the congressman finds so inspirational. But it's hardly courageous, and it's nothing close to fair. He asks almost nothing of those who could easily contribute more, and he demands greater and greater sacrifices from those who are already just barely scraping by. This isn't a budget, Paul Ryan said last week. This is a cause. Well, I agree with him there. He's not doing what he's doing to be mean, not deliberately anyway. He's simply following his core political beliefs to their logical, if somewhat heartless, conclusion. Many of us, though, have a different set of core beliefs. We don't believe that the only measure of effective government is how much spending can you cut. We understand that a better measure is how can we best help people to help themselves, and even how can we best protect people who can't help themselves. That's why societies and governments are formed in the first place, right? To accomplish more together than we can separately. That's why the preamble to our Constitution pledges to provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare. Those are causes, too. Causes worth supporting.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. We'll be off for a few weeks because of the holidays and the Channel 10 auction. We'll see you when we get back. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.